What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with a special edition with some more PGA DFS picks and lineup advice. FanDuel, DraftKings this time for the 2023 Open Championship, the last major of the year out at Royal Liverpool. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. You know me if you've been tuning in every week. Fortunately, I've had the pleasure of being joined by our golf writer, golf expert Niromada this week. Niro, what's up, buddy? Good to see you.
Good to see you, Brian. I'm excited. Last major of the year. We wait a long time, and then they come fast and furious over a 4 month span. So I'm sipping some tea right now, trying to put myself in a very European frame of mind. So don't mind my slurping in the background.
Love to hear it. For those of you who are new, you haven't seen these videos before, Nero is very secretive. We're not going to show his face on screen, but you're going to hear all of his expertise via audio. And Nero, you and I had the pleasure also of winning some nice tickets last week. I got my second King of the Desert. You and I both now have entries into the 4K Millie on DraftKings this week, which filled super early, by the way. So not just for everyone, but for us too, a big week.
Yeah, it's a big week. It's the last week of like really giant contests. There are bigger contests for the Tour Championship, some of the playoff events, and that kind of thing. And honestly, especially on DraftKings, golf has reached the point now where there's pretty big contests every single week. This is the last week of like the really giant ones until the Masters next year in April. That's a good reminder. If you have not registered yet for I mean, they're filling all over the place everywhere. So like, go do it now. Even though lock is still whatever 15 hours away.
Right. So we are recording this Wednesday morning around 10 a.m. Eastern. So just be advised when you listen to this later what time we are recording this. And again, so let's lay out the agenda for what we plan to do in this episode. First, we'll talk about the course, Royal Liverpool. We haven't seen the event here since 2014. So have there been any changes? What this course is going to play like? What type of characteristics from our golfers do we want on a course like this? We'll analyze the weather, always important every week, but especially on these coastal venues. And as always in the Open, it'll be important this week. And we'll talk about how the weather, depending on what it does, if that can impact the characteristics we want in our golfers. So make sure you listen to that. And then we'll analyze the betting markets. For those of you who've watched these videos every week, you know we have our Sharp Sportsbook overlap plays where we analyze 3 or 4 Sharp Sportsbooks and we look for golfers' odds to win, how they have moved throughout the week, and if a golfer's odds to win have improved at all the sports books, they qualify as our trifecta overlap plays. Generally, they're very, very, very good DFS plays. And then we'll close it out with some ownership discussion. Who's the chalk going to be? Should we play them? Should we fade them? And then who are some, let's say, 5% or less options in ownership that can help us win these $1 million contests? Because that's what we're all here for. So, Nero, I will throw it over to you. Royal Liverpool. I'll bring up the daily plug on my side. The daily plug, for those who aren't familiar, is our weekly write-up for PGA. Nero comes in, gives his top plays, lineup construction tips, most importantly, breaks down the course. And so, Nero, I'll kick it to you. Talk to me about Royal Liverpool, what maybe has changed since 2014, and what type of golfers we can expect to be successful at this course.
Sure. So there actually have been a number of changes since 2014. Excuse me. Uh, and most of them have been smaller. Hole is lengthened by 5 yards here, 10 yards there. They moved a lot of the bunkers so that they're more in tune with modern distances. So instead of, let's say, a fairway bunker that was located 290 yards off the professional tees in 2014, and they're now located 320 yards off the professional tees this year. So you're still trying to keep the hazardous for the modern tour player. Outside of that, the biggest change is they to accommodate the crowds and the merchandise tenting. They've taken over what is usually the practice area for members, and that area resides in between the first and 18th holes, which means that there is now like they've really shrunk the fairway on 18, and there's an internal out of bounds that runs really tight down the right side of the 18th fairway. So 18th it's a par 5, but it's now a much riskier risk and reward type hole. You can drive it down the right, cut off a bunch of distance, but you got to flirt with the out of bounds, or you can bail left and have a longer, more difficult set of approach shots into the green. So I think in general the course has been toughened up a little bit since then. But like all open courses, the primary defense is the wind. And if the wind doesn't blow crazy, like modern tour players go low on these courses, that's just the way it goes. Maybe outside of Carnoustie, but we're not at Carnoustie, I don't think, for a few more years. So I would expect winning scores to be roughly what they have been. The wind forecast, it's going to be windy, but it doesn't look like it's going to be crazy windy. I would, I'm guessing, let's say somewhere in the 14 under to 19 under range, probably for a winning score. The course itself is, relatively flat. I mean, all open courses but there are differences in how much they go up and down the sand dunes for a lot of them. This course does not have a ton of that. The biggest feature is the internal out of bounds. There's six internal out of bounds markings on six of the 14 non-par three holes. And what that really means is a lot of these holes dog leg, so they have a lot of bend to them, even though they are, it's still a mostly flattish piece of property by the sea, like most open courses are. And you'll see on the outer edge of those dog legs, then that's where you have the out of bounds side. So even though your ball might be in another fairway or something else, it's out of bounds for that particular hole. All that really means is that ball striking is a little bit more important at Royal Liverpool than it is at the other open venues. So, for example, I will be more willing to play your general American ball striking robot PGA Tour player in this week than I would be at other open venues. A lot of open venues, I chuck those guys out and I really play the European links and wind specialists very heavy. And clearly, I'm still playing those guys heavy this week. I'm just a little bit more willing to play those American guys this week because I do think ball striking going to be more important than usual. And if you look at the past leaderboards from 2014 and 2006, see a whole bunch, see Jim Furyk anytime you see Jim Furyk in top fives and top tens in a course, you know that being in control of your ball, strategy, and ball striking is important at that course. And that's the case here.
Absolutely. And for those of you who want some more information, two sources I'll give you. Michael Kim, tour player, is actually tweeting a lot about his practice rounds, going through individual holes, back nines, what he's seeing, comparing it to the tape he's watched in 2014 and 2006. Really insightful to hear a guy who's going to be playing that course tomorrow give his insights and his opinions on how the course is playing. So go check out his Twitter, Michael Kim. And then Rick Shields, whose YouTube channel I am far too familiar with as a newer golfer. He actually just played the full 18 there. I think it was a few days ago with a couple guys. And just watching someone play the 18 gives you a real sense of some of the dangers and what's important at that course. And speaking of dangers, that 17th hole that they added, Nero, is a pure nightmare.
Yes, the little par three. I think they call it Little I believe. Um, I think it's going to play nothing more than like 130, 140 yards most of the days. But like most, I think there was also a very short par three at the LA Country Club for those of you who
Oh, yeah.
are sweating the U.S. Open. It'll be a very similar type of hole, meaning very small landing area. Miss it left, it goes down. I think there's some reeds as it gets closer to the ocean and like a real trashy area to the left. There's bunkers, deep bunkers to the right that you don't want to be in. Basically, like any poorly struck shot or something that's, just even a couple yards offline is going to find trouble. So you're landing, even though it's a very short hole, the landing area is very small.
Yeah, just an insane hole that I'm excited to play. And between that and the internal out of bounds on 18 is going to make for a very scary closing stretch if you have the leaders, and a very interesting closing stretch if you're coming from behind in DFS and you need some of those guys to fall. So, all right, let's talk about the weather just a little bit more, Nero. I'll bring up Windfinder here, our trusted resource for wind direction, wind speed when it comes to PGA DFS. And no real wave advantage, it looks like right now. Just steady 13, 15 mile per hour winds, similar gusts. Like you said, no defense. So the impact will be a little bit greater than your typical 13 to 15 mile per hour winds on, let's say, a regular PGA Tour course. But as we know, this area of the world is notoriously finicky when it comes to forecasts and how quickly they can change. I guess my question to you, two questions really. Is it worth wave stacking in the hopes that the weather does change and we get and there and an advantage does appear out of nowhere? And two, what type of weather can happen that we're not forecasting that could change the types of golfers that we want to play? And I ask that because mostly ownership falls in line with what we expect the course to play like, what we expect the forecast to be, what golfers are expected to do well. And if the forecast changes, that can lead us to some lower owned guys that can succeed.
Yeah. So first of all, I agree with you. Uh, I am not going to do an excessive amount of one wave stacking because at the moment I'm just not seeing a wave advantage. I will absolutely stack both waves within my set of lineups. Maybe 5 to 10% one for the morning and 5 to 10% for the afternoon. Again, that will still be composed of players that I want in my player pool anyway, so I will
Right.
not be just playing guys because they're in a particular wave advantage. But just that, like you said, the forecast changes all the time. Wave advantages can kind of materialize here out of nowhere. And you want to be able to at least have some exposure to that should it happen. Honestly, I would say the most important thing that you can do, the contest generally locks, 1 in the morning, midnight, 11 and 10 p.m., depending on where you live. Before you go to bed tonight, one last check of Wind Finder and see if the forecast has changed. That's the best thing that you can do because truthfully, it could be different, 15 hours from now when you look compared to what we're seeing today, and you might want to do some last minute tweaking of your exposures.
For sure. And let's say the wind does pick up or completely
Yeah.
subsides. Does that change who could potentially do well at this course?
Yeah, I think there's two things. Number one, if it starts raining, which does happen also out of nowhere at these courses quite often, and if it takes a decent amount of rain, then obviously the distance guys get a bigger edge than they would have had previously. And if the wind does pick up, then I think you turn back my previous comments on the American ball striking robot PGA Tour player. I would want to play less of those guys, and I would want to focus more heavily on European players who have a lot of experience playing in coastal wind and on these courses that are exposed on every single hole to the wind coming off the water.
Fair enough. Very fair point. All right, let's move on to the betting markets now. And again, for those of you who have watched this show every Wednesday, you know that we compare the betting markets, different sharp sports books to see and analyze movement among golfers' odds to win. Four guys fit the bill this week. Again, we are recording this at 10:11 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Niromada will come in this afternoon in the Daily Plug, do his Wednesday update, some more betting market analysis, any more final thoughts he's had since he's posted the plug. And then in Discord this evening, probably 8 or 9 o'clock or so Eastern, I will come in and post the final Sharp Sportsbook overlap play. So those are two spots you want to check later this evening after you watch this video. So let's bring DraftKings back up. And Nero, I have these four guys on the list that have been hit at every single Sharp Sportsbook. Their odds to win have improved at all three. Again, these guys, these types of golfers who are hit at all the books, really great DFS prospects most weeks. So let's start with the highest and most expensive of the four, the cover boy of the Daily Plug. Ownership getting steamed a little bit thanks to some of these betting market movements. But it's Patrick Cantlay. So I'll name the guys, Nero. Just talk to me a little bit about them, what you expect their ownership to be, and what you think they're. Why? I guess the best thing is why do you think they were hit at all the books? So
Sure.
Cantlay.
Yeah, well, the macro point, which applies to all four of them, is look at the four names: Adam Scott, Patrick Cantlay, Corey Connors, Tony Finau. See any of those four guys that are renowned for their short game or their putting or anything like that? No, sir. Every single one of these guys is a ball striking robot. If you're going to, stick with my theme, even though they're not all American, and that should give you a hint as to what the betting market is valuing at this course and for these players. So I think at a macro level, ignoring my personal takes on these guys, that is just another check mark for the things that you should be emphasizing and looking for. As for Cantlay himself, my guess that for the reason why he's been hit, he underperforms in majors. His Open Championship record, however, is actually decent in a number of higher finishes. He did not play, he did not make the cut last week at the Scottish, which has led to his initial depressed ownership and his expanded odds initially. But he played well on Friday on day two, and he's Patrick Cantlay. So I would expect him to play well. I think even at the, let's say if he ends up more like 12 to 14% instead of 8 to 9% for ownership that he was forecasted at originally, he's still a perfectly fine play. Obviously, I like him better when he's at 8 to 9% ownership, but I am still clearly going to play him. And I'm not, as you've noted, Brian, I'm not in the business of fading the trifecta plays. It really comes down to just a question of, am I going to meet the field on these guys, or am I going to try and get over the field? And Cantlay, even at 12, 14%, he's still pretty easy to get over the field without killing yourself if he plays poorly.
Exactly. Exactly. And the same goes for a lot of these other guys. Next, we have Tony Finau, 8,200, who I am eternally grateful for in the last Open, making that 12-footer on 18 to make the cut en route to my 200K a week or whatever it was. So, Finau, appreciate that putt. Pretty good record in Opens, if I'm not mistaken. Talk to me about Finau. What do you think his ownership will be and his prospects?
Yeah, I mean, Tony's got good prospects for me. He did, his recent form, I suppose, has been a little spotty for him, historically. I believe all six of his Open starts have been inside the top 30, and I think he has two or three top tens in there. He was top 25 for strokes gained tee to green in the start in the I think the two starts that he had before the Rocket Mortgage. Again, wind the clock for a lot of these guys. What you really have to do is like wind the clock back a couple months and then ask yourself the question of, okay, I knew that I could get Tony Finau at depressed ownership levels, and given his course history and his course fit, well, I'll say his Open history and his course fit, for how well he fits these. And again, if I could get him, let's say sub 15%, which I'm sure he will be somewhere in like 11, 12, 13% range, and only $8,200, would I play that all day? Yes. But the reason why, because his most recent form in the last month hasn't been amazing. But again, it's mostly been the short game that's let him down. So I'm definitely going to get over the field on Finau.
Absolutely. And he was a similar price in the Open last year, but much more highly owned. So we'll certainly take the break in ownership from a year ago. And next we have Adam Scott, 7,900, the sole non-North American, I will say here. I was going to say American, but Corey Connors of Canadian descent. So Adam Scott, 7,900, also missed the cut at the Genesis Scottish Open, missed the cut at the U.S. Open, but again, one of the trifecta plays.
Yeah. So all striking machine. We know that about Adam Scott, right? Played again similar to Cantlay. Did not play well in the first round. The Scottish shot 67 in the second round. So I mean that's good enough. That's good enough for me. Was in the top 20. I think he was 19th at the Travelers in his last start before the Scottish. Did miss the cut at the U.S. Open, not by much, but he did not play that well there. But before that, he was playing really well. And again, I think he's similar. I think he's a similar story to Cantlay, to Finau to some extent. Finau didn't play at the Scottish, but those are three players that fit this stuff well. Two of them missed the cut last week, so their odds get inflated, creep up a little bit more higher than they probably should be. And Finau, hasn't been playing as well lately, so bettors are trying to look for value options as we lead up to the first tee time, and all three of those guys, good Open history, good course fits. Their skill sets fit the course, and inflated price with some recent poor performances, and there you go.
Easy. And Scott, we have projected for 8% on DraftKings right now, which I hope holds, which would be fantastic. And then finally, we have Corey Connors, who did not miss the cut last week, like some of these other
Nope.
guys, but did miss the cut at the U.S. Open and the Memorial. So not a pure record as of late, but 7,700 bucks.
Yes. And one final thing on Ab Scott: if he stays at 8% and you have 16% of him, you have 2x the field, and you don't even have that much of him really, right?
Yeah.
And you could even go 20% of him, and you're getting close to 3x the field. So anyway, on Connors, like I think Connors is. He played pretty well last week. He had a round of 65 and a round of 66, and that 66 was in the final round in that wind-blown hurricane they played in. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Uh, Pretty good open record. Clearly, if we're saying this course emphasizes the ball striking a little bit more than the other open venues, Corey Connors is one of the like 10 best ball strikers in the world. So like he just makes a lot of sense, and I will certainly. He's a little tougher to get over the field on just because his ownership is higher than those guys. And why is his ownership higher? Because he made the cut last week. Um, but certainly am not interested, especially at $7,700. I'm not really that interested in getting a very under the field on Connors. I also think he makes a good safe style of low risk contest type of play or lower risk contest type of play because he should really make the cut. Famous last words. And he definitely, if he makes the cut, he's got a good chance at a top 20 finish. And for $7,700, like you would, if you knew that before the tournament started, you would take that all day, not just here at the Open. You'd take it at any PGA Tour event.
Totally. Absolutely. So those four guys all fit the bill that we've been talking about for most of the show. Let's go back to DraftKings here. And again, we'll post the final update of this list if any guys drop off this list or any new ones are added later this evening in our Discord, occupifantasy.com/Discord. The link is in the description below. If you're still watching and you enjoy the show, do us two favors. One, give us a thumbs up. Let's see if we can get this to 100 likes. Obviously, it helps us out. The more likes we get, the more times our video is likely viewed. But also, it lets us know that you enjoy this content, you enjoy Niromada's appearance. The thumbs up is a barometer for us to know how well the content is being received by you, the viewer. So give us a thumbs up. Let's get it to 100. And any questions you have, comment on the video below and give us a prediction. Comment on the video. Let us know who you think will win the Open. We always love to see what our members and our viewers think. So give us a comment. Who will win the Open? Just comment on the video below. All right, Nero, we can't close the video. We're going to talk about ownership here in a second. We can't do this video and not talk about the new DraftKings pricing for this event. Scheffler up to 12,500. The floor is down to 5,500 for the cheapest golfer, most of which we are not playing. But give us your thoughts on the top of the market, Scheffler, Rory, Rahm, the trio that we're always discussing in these types of events, and what you think this new salary structure means for both lineup constructions, maybe ownership.
Yeah, I think like at a macro level, we've certainly seen it this year, especially in the elevated events, that a lot of the really high end pricing, uh, which again previously before this, let's say was like the low 11s, on DraftKings, like maybe 11,200 and 11,400, something like that. Those guys were playing outstanding. A lot of them were winning, and people were just jamming stars and scrub-ish type of lineups all over the place, and winning, winning lots of GPPs. And if you're someone who doesn't play the top of the price range as heavy as other people, as my Roto Tracker results would attest to in 2023, you probably have not had a great year. So, I don't. Again, I'm not behind the scenes at DraftKings. I don't know exactly what they're doing here, but I know the effect, and the effect is it makes it harder to jam stars and scrubs types of lineups and just pound those guys at the top of the price range and still fill out as strong of a team as you could have filled out previously. So 5,500 to 6K guys. There are some playable players in there. I'm not super interested in the vast majority of them, but there are definitely some players in there that I think we'll probably cover when we talk about the sub 5 percenters that might be worth some extra looks this week. But the thing that it does for me is that it does make the bottom end of the 6K range, like the 6,500 to $6,000 range, which is usually full of the amateurs, older players, and out of form Europeans and players ranked really low in the world golf rankings. Those all players are all now in the 5,500 to 6K range. So your bottom of the 6K range is the thing that is actually a lot more playable than it used to be. And so I will not be afraid to take players from down in that area. Scott Stallings is a good example. The model doesn't like him, and for a good reason. His form isn't that great, but here's a middle of the road, pretty solid PGA Tour player playing in a major, and he's priced at $6,200, and that's just not something you would see in the without this new pricing structure that they have.
Right. Whereas before at 6,200, we would see someone like Mark Warren or Darren
Yep.
Clark or something like that.
Yeah.
So
100%.
yeah.
100%.
So I mean, honestly, it does help the more balanced builds even more
Yep.
so if you take one of those
Agreed.
guys. So, really interesting thought process there, Nero. All right, let's close this show out with some ownership. I'll bring up the Occupy model. OccupyFantasy.com ranks every golfer, FanDuel and DraftKings with projected ownership. The final ownership update will be this evening, let's say 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern. This is the second to last update that you see on screen now. Let's talk about the highest owned guys first. Just two guys above 20% so far. Tommy Fleetwood, Tyrrell Hatton. We'll see if that changes throughout the day. And then, maybe 5 or 6 more guys in that 15% or higher bucket that we traditionally call high owned. So pretty spread out ownership. Unsurprisingly, two of the Euro guys, Fleetwood and Hatton, getting the most love here. But what is your initial thought here, Nero, on the guys in this range? Anyone that you're specifically saying, wow, that's a little overpriced as far as ownership goes, or do you think most of this ownership is pretty warranted on these guys?
Yeah, I would say in general, most of the ownership is pretty warranted on almost all of these guys. When I'm looking at the 15 percenters and above, for sure. So Fleetwood and Hatton, that's a lot of ownership for those two players at $9,300 and $9,400, especially with respect to the other players that they are priced around. However, great course fits, great wind players, great links players. I mean, Hatton honestly might be the best links player in Europe, despite his personality and how upset he gets on the course. And Fleetwood grew up, I don't know, 8 minutes from this course, 10 minutes, 15 minutes from the course. Like they both fit really well. It's personal preference. I'm playing them, and I'm gonna get weird elsewhere and get different someplace else. I'm not. I don't want to be under or fading Fleetwood or Hatton, but clearly you can make game theory arguments to do so. But yeah, I'm not. I don't know of any of the guys. Let's see, any of those guys above 15%.
The one guy I have a question for you is McIntyre,
Yeah,
who obviously is mispriced at
yeah,
6,800, but
yeah.
a high owned $6,800 player who I am trying to be unbiased here, but I just have visions of him spraying his tee shots at the Himmerland when I had a vested interest. And if this is a place where you cannot spray your tee shots, that is creeping into the back of my mind. And it's certainly playing into his low OF index here. But I mean, generally, $6,800, 15% plus is not a guy you want to play in the largest contest.
100%. If I wrote a PGA DFS guidebook, one of my core tenets would be chalk players in the lower price ranges. Again, with normal pricing structure, would be, let's call it like 7,500 and below. Playing chalk players in there is not really a recipe for good DFS success, and that's mostly because they are the players are priced in that region for a reason, and that they're simply not as strong of players as their ownership implies that they are. McIntyre's getting a huge bump because of how well he played last week at the Scottish, and people watched him duel with McIlroy down the stretch. And I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for two of the better iron shots that I've ever seen from Rory on 17 and 18, like McIntyre would have won the Scottish Open, and then his ownership would be even higher than it is today. The fade reason would be He's from Scotland. He left it all out on there on the Scottish Open, and it's just human nature. You will have a hard time bringing that same level of focus and enthusiasm that you had to the Scottish that he will have to bring on Thursday, to kick off this tournament. Um, yeah, I think he's. I don't think I can fade him because he is just a great value. And honestly, for low risk contests, like I think you just play him and move on.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think there's any reason to get under him for low risk. But for high risk, 100%. You can get under him. You could fade him completely if you wanted to. And even if you do want to play him, I don't think he's someone that you want to get like super aggressive with and try and get like 2 or 3x over the field. It'll feel that way because it feels easy. He makes your builds really easy. It's a click, free square at 6,800. But as we've learned, this is not a backup running back in the NFL who's going to get 30 touches. Like there's no such
Yes.
thing as a free square in PGA, DFS. I don't care what you read or what people tell you. It's non-existent.
Correct. And very good point all around. And I would just say the argument about him playing so well last week, leading to better odds this week and increased ownership, is probably a negative because, as you pointed out, how much can he really give this week? You can imagine
Mhm.
the dejection dealing with the loss last week and how we're looking for qualitative factors to fade or play guys, and that certainly plays into it. So, speaking of which, let's look for some alternatives. Let's sort the model here 6% or less. This will be the final segment of the show. These are the players every single week, Niromada, that win GPPs. Go pull up a tournament. There will be at least one, most of the times two guys, 5, 6, 7% or less that are requirements to win GPPs. It feels tough to click on these guys, but you got to do it. So let's just name some guys, 6% or less, that we feel are more likely than their ownership to end up in winning lineups. I'll start at the very top, has the highest OF index of 6% guys or less. You wrote him up in the plug, or at least listed him as a guy you like. Siwoo Kim.
100%. Like I think my macro, as I always like to do, a little macro takeaway first. Sort the model, go to the 6% or below, and just start going through the list and see how many of those players ignore their current form, ignore how they might fit for links golf, and just ignore that stuff for 1 second. And say how many of those guys are Ryder Cuppers or President Cup type of players. And you could just go Spieth, DeChambeau, Siwoo Kim, Jason Day, like Cam Young, Joaquin Neiman. You can just keep rolling down the list and then go down even further and you get Matt Fitzpatrick, Hideki Matsuyama, Justin Thomas, Sung J M. Like, these guys are all very good at the game of golf. And they are all 6% or lower for ownership. So you can clearly find reasons to play them. And of course, do they have awards? 100%. That's why they're 6% owned or less. But yeah, I think for your particular one, I think Siwoo is a good fit. Again, he fits our mold, right? Ball striking robot for the most part. Someone who has turned himself into a much more consistent golfer over the last 12 months than he ever was previously. And again, very cheap price, like 7,300. Spieth, you're like, okay, Spieth missed the cut, Scottish missed the cut before that. Obviously has won the Open before. He's a great Open player, but it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to play, pay 9,700 for an out of form Jordan Spieth, and that's fine. Like I can get with that. But I will be playing Jordan Spieth, and I'm certain I will have more than 6% of him when it's finished. I won't love it, but yeah, I'll take an unknown Jordan Spieth who comes alive at these types of events, compared to compared to what his ownership will actually end up being.
Totally. Let's just go back and forth naming guys, and maybe we'll give a sentence about why we like them or a reason to play them. I'll
Yep.
go with Bryson, 6%. I think while we're not necessarily looking for length it can always be a factor, and maybe there's some lines he can take that others can't. So I'll say Bryson at 6%.
Exactly. I think again for the most part the the guys that spray it I'm not as interested in, but Bryson and the longest of the long guys, one of which is down further in this list that I'll also talk about. They do have a slight advantage this week. I talked about the dog legs. A lot of these holes bend right to left or left to right, and that's where a lot of those internal out of bounds are. they can carry that stuff and they can, make that a less of a risk for them because they can hit a drive that goes 330 yards almost with carry, and not many other people in the field can do that. Again, it's always a little bit of a guessing game, but if that does turn out to be an advantage this week, then Bryson, who's played very well in the majors this year and certainly has been coming back into form in the last 6 months, you could make a lot worse plays than him.
Totally. Who you got next?
My next one on the list would be Matthew Jordan. Basically, like, he belongs at the club, grew up around here. I think he's hitting the opening tee shot on Thursday morning. And just, again, for since I am a personally like a course fit local game truther, he's definitely someone I'll be playing.
All right, I'll go with Sep Straka, 4%. He is the biggest odds mover at Circus Sports so far. Odds basically cut in half. And again, big odds, but that big of a move caught my eye. And winner on tour recently. We see a lot of open winners win recently. So I'll go with Straka at 4%.
Another solid ball striking robot from the PGA Tour, Sepp Straka. My next one would be Matthew Southgate, one of the sub 6K players, I think, who's totally playable. Uh, 4% projected ownership. He's a true links specialist. His links performances compared to his other performances on the PGA Tour, or sorry, on the European or the DP World Tour, as we call it, are just night and day. So I'll always take a links specialist on a links course, especially one who's $5,600 and sub 5% ownership.
I like
Because
that.
again, at that level, like, what do we really need him to do? Just make the cut. Like, I really just need him to make the cut. If he finishes like a top 40 bonus, top 20, he can win you a GPP. But mostly, we just want him to make the cut, and he's definitely got a better chance of that than his ownership and price combination would tell you.
Love that. I'll throw out a name here who has burned me on many of 4K tickets in the past. Henrik Stenson. Am I wrong in thinking that this fits in pretty well? And he's picked up his play a little bit. Again, he's 4% owned and is getting some love in the betting markets.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. It fits him. It fits him really well, and his live results are
Yeah,
have
T6,
been
T4,
better.
2 of the last 3. Yeah,
Yeah, they've been better lately. So again, yes, he's older, but outside of, like I've been saying, outside of the true like elite bombers, this is absolutely a course where I would be willing to play a more experienced, wily veteran, to use some narratives, type of player compared to other open venues. Podrick Harrington is another player in that same mold. He's obviously safer than Stenson because he's been playing a lot more and a lot better than Stenson, but Stenson playable for sure.
Before I let you pick your next pick, I just want to give 3 of the easiest possible names: Hideki, Justin Thomas, Matthew Fitzpatrick. They're all 3%. Just play those guys.
Just playing. And again, and by the way, like, I'm not saying to go crazy. You go 10% of all three of those guys, they miss the cut or play poorly. Do they really kill you? Not really. And you have 3x plus the field on all three of them.
Yes, super easy. All right, you got any more names for me?
I think maybe my last one would be Thomas Peters, down in the 2% range. Well, I have a few others below that, but I don't know that I don't need to share all those with the group because I feel bad when those guys play awfully. But Peters, again, playing better on live over the last couple months. Great fit, almost elite bomber, a lot of experience on coastal European courses, a good wind player, low ball flight, like all that kind of stuff. Like, pretty solid play for $7,100 and 2% ownership on DK.
Agree. Totally agree. I like Grillo as well. Talk about winners of
Yep.
recent events,
Yep.
ball strike approach specifically. So Grillo at 3%.
Hello, Rio is the absolute epitome and cover boy picture in Wikipedia of ball striking robot. If that phrase actually existed, there would be a picture of Emiliano sitting right there.
Yeah, there we go. All right, we'll close out the show. I'm not gonna let you get away with it. We're gonna give at least one player that is 0 or 1% owned that you're gonna be playing 5% of. Davis Riley is excluded from the conversation because that is the auto pick. So we're not allowed to pick Davis Riley. Let me see if I can find one. Do you have one off the tip of your tongue that you can give?
Just scrolling through the lists because Riley is the easy answer for that 100%. Yeah, I got one.
Okay, who you got?
Romain Langasque
Now
at
we're talking. All right.
6,901%, which might be 0% when it's all said and done. Pretty consistent actually on the European or on the DP World Tour so far this year. Pretty good record, or good enough, let's say, record in these windy coastal venues. Not even here, but some of those events like that they play in the Middle East, like in Doha and that kind of thing, where the courses are not like a true links course, but it's very similar, like by the sea, exposed to the wind, all that kind of stuff. And he's got a pretty good record of those, and clearly the model's picking up on that a little bit. He's got a very high OF score, 65 plus for someone who doesn't get a lot of recognition anywhere.
For sure. I'll give Nick Taylor, which kind of feels like a cop out. I know he's only 1%, but I feel like he should maybe be higher. But again, recent winner,
Hmm.
higher OF index. Let me find an off the wall name for you, Nero. Let me keep scrolling here. I don't want to leave anyone feeling like they didn't get enough from the show.
I've got one more for
Okay,
sure.
go for it.
I'm trying to find him out of the model. Christo Lamprecht
Oh
at
yes.
5,600.
This is
Has
the other
anyone?
5600 guy we were
Yeah,
thinking about earlier.
yeah. If you read the plugs regularly, you know that I tend to play the younger players more than everyone else. I'm a huge golf nerd. That's part of it. So this could be a leak in my game, but increasingly, I think we've seen, regardless of my own issues, that these younger guys, when they come on tour, are just, especially the very elite ones, are exceptionally ready to compete right off the bat. Ludwig Aberg would be a great example of that, which you've seen on the PGA Tour in the last couple months. Lamprecht is, let's just call him a stud European amateur player, and he's gonna be 0.2 whatever percent. So grab 3% of him, and you've got huge leverage on the field.
And he's what, the number 3 ranked amateur in the world, something like that.
Something like that. I think he's in the top five somewhere. But yeah, he's very talented. Does that mean he's going to show it this week? Certainly not. It might be too much for him. It might be an overwhelming experience. All those things apply. But again, with these guys, especially the way they've been coming on tour lately, like ready to rock, like I'd rather be early than late on them.
For sure. I totally agree. When that's something we try to talk about in the plug, obviously, and on these shows every single week as well. Going with the old narrative again, Zach Johnson. Am I wrong in thinking he's a decent fit here?
No, he could play. I mean, the thing with Zach that that he'll be extra plugged in on as a Ryder Cup captain. Like he's trying to play with. I see him playing practice rounds with Cam Young and like the fringe kind of Ryder Cup guys. So yes, he's a little divided in his focus, but he's in it. Like he's been prepping, he's been playing. He's actually been playing okay over these last couple months. So um, of any course that's going to fit him in his style of playing, more conservative, strategic golf, not spraying the ball right and left, like certainly is a guy that could make the cut here. And again, as we've talked about, it's really all you want from these guys down here. Like you're using them to fill out a lineup where you can fit in a lot more really high priced good players. So all you're asking these guys to do is make the cut, and if they can sneak a top 40, they could possibly win you a GPP if you have the right combination of stud players with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I think that'll close out the show. We'll give our final thoughts here in a second. Before we do, again, make sure you are subscribed to our channel here on YouTube. It's free to do. Just click subscribe below the video. That'll get you notified whenever we go live, upload any new videos. Subscribing is a great way to support us for free, and it's a great way for you to get notified when we do anything here on YouTube. Give us that thumbs up. We're trying to get to 100 likes. We're trying to see how much of you support us and like these shows every week. And again, comment with who you think will win the Open below. We'd love to hear from you. Nero, let's close it out. Final thoughts, anything we haven't talked about, or just maybe tying it all together with a nice little bow.
Yeah, my final piece of advice would be check the win finder link before you go to bed tonight. Like if you take nothing else from this video, like that's the most important thing you can do. I said it in the plug, but like this is the most important wind forecast of the year uh, in PGA DFS. So make sure you check it one last time before you go to bed, or as close to lock as possible. And that's the best thing you can do.
Absolutely. And again, embrace the lower owned guys. I will say that once again, as I do every week, but especially this week as well. Lots of great plays. I know it's very easy to click on the 20% or 15% guy who's mispriced technically, but when you can play a guy who's just as good and maybe slightly worse at 3%, traditionally, especially in these majors, that is the way to go. So, the daily plug, OccupyFantasy.com. Remember, OccupyFantasy.com is where you can get everything you saw on screen today. Daily plug, top plays, lineup construction tips, Wednesday betting market update. The Occupy model ranks every golfer. FanDuel and DraftKings has the projected ownership. And then our lineup builder allows you to build up to 300 lineups on FanDuel and DraftKings using all the rules that we talk about in the daily plug. So for Niromada, you can find him just in our Discord server. He's hidden from social media, just in our Discord, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. Nero, thank you for joining once again. You can follow me at Brian Jester FF. Follow us on Twitter at OccupyFantasy. Good luck at the Open. Go enjoy it.